One of the main instruments we're sampling today, and we're getting to play, is the Marvin, the little Marvin from Morph Beats, and it's quite an interesting instrument because instead of having to have lots of different bits of metal and assemble them into an instrument, it kind of does. It's multifaceted, so it's not just kind of a huge cowbell. It's a resonator with interesting springs and all sorts of bits attached to it. So getting into play something like that's always really good. And I haven't had a chance to play one, so it was kind of, yes, that sounds up my street. That's kind of an experimental sort of little toy. Finding new sounds is great. I mean, a big part of my job as a percussionist is just finding new instruments and finding new sounds. Obviously, today's a perfect opportunity. I've been given a new instrument to work with, and but finding new mallets and finding new objects and working with instrument makers, that's one of the great joys of my job. We've done five sort of main things. So using the hands, and we're kind of using a mixture of sort of Indian sort of tabla strokes and bongo strokes, and occasionally some sort of fuller hand things that you use on a djembe. So bringing different skills from different cultures and just trying them out on different parts of the instrument. But it sort of goes from fingertips to full hand. That's quite nice. It's a very tactile instrument, so it sounds great with the hands. And then the other stuff we're using some really big soft mallets, these sort of marimba things, which are quite big. It takes all the attack off the bell and the instruments. Then we go to a kind of conventional drumstick using both ends, one for precision and one for beef. And then we're using a couple of different sorts of brushes. We're using a sort of lightweight metal brush like this, and then we're using these fantastic bamboo rods as well. So that gives a different sort of clarity. So those are the five main things we've been using on the Marvin to get some range in the sound. In this environment where we've got one instrument and we've got the ability to have a lot of microphones to get the real nuances of the instrument kind of up close in the wide room, it's really exciting. One of the things I take into these sort of sample sessions where I'm working by myself is my experience as a solo performer. The range of dynamics you have to open up as a performer is much wider. So the nuance between pianissimo and fortissimo is much wider, and you're looking for all these different colours and dynamics in between. Whereas often if you're working in a much larger group of players, you don't have to do those extremes in your playing. So it's really exciting to be working by myself with these instruments, because you can really excite that range. It's kind of, there's this nice thing about working with the number of round robins we're doing, trying to look for the same consistency of sound every time, which is something we always look to achieve, but it's very hard to do. So you get that sort of beautiful kind of, nothing's quite the same every time, even though we're looking for it to be exactly the same. So that's kind of interesting too. Often these sessions, as the performer, they can sort of start to take their toll after hour number 7 or 8. But actually, one of the really interesting things is you get to hear some of the sounds in total isolation. So it's a really useful thing once in a while to be able to just kind of stand back and say, oh, this instrument does this, and I can do this in this way. And then working with yourself and with Tom, it's that dialogue, with composers and producers. And we've got Nick here as well, thinking about sound, thinking about mallets, thinking about range, which is something I have to do every day. But you're sort of pushing the envelope quite far and quite hard. So all those opportunities to develop one's ears and senses and take on board some fresh ideas. It's great.